Okay guys, so for this video I'm just going to show you guys how to solder standard header pins into your breakout boards. We're going to use the Hakko soldering kits. These are in 2155. We got solder with flux, and then obviously we got safety glasses. So before we start soldering, just put these guys on, and then we're going to turn on the soldering iron. And to change the settings here, I typically, for this system, this is just ramping up to the correct temperature right now. But for this system, I generally solder header pins at around 850, which is like one of the higher ends for temperature, but that just enables me to heat up things quicker. You can solder, I would recommend like 750 to 850 is a good temperature to solder these pins onto the board. So based on the application and based on the type of solder that you use, you're going to want to adjust your temperature. So for leaded solder, it's a lower temperature, and then lead-free or row house compliant solder that doesn't have any lead, it typically needs to be a higher temperature at which the solder melts. So if we want to change the settings, we just hold the enter button for about 3 seconds, and then you'll see this blink, and then you can change your settings. So I want to set it to 850, and I just press enter 2 more times, and then it's set. Right now, this is the actual temperature and it's about to reach 850. So we're good to go. Now, the other thing that we need to check is that our soldering tip is clean. So this tip, I've already cleaned it, but let me just show you what you would do, if you didn't have a clean tip. So each one of the soldering stations, they have wire brush and a sponge. So make sure there's water in the sponge, and you can gently just wipe this and clean the tip off, and then you can also use this to get larger pieces of debris, and then this will give you like a really nice and shiny soldering tip. And this is very important to get really good solder joints. um, and let's just jump into the setup now. Okay, so I'm just going to break off standard header. It's a square post on both sides. And so for my breakout board has 4 headers, so I'm going to break off 4 pins like so with some pliers. Okay, so I got my 4 pins, and then I got my breakout board. And the trick that I use to get a nice, easy solder joint and just have everything kind of stabilized is I put the header pins in the board. And let me see if I could just get a better angle here. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in even further when I actually solder, but I just want to kind of go over how it looks from a high level. Okay, so this guy's the soldering pins. Let's see. All right, so okay, that's a pretty good. Now you can see what's going on. So before I even apply solder, when I'm trying to get a really good solder joint, I want this tip to touch not only the pad that's on the PCB board, but I also want to press it against the pin. So what I'm doing here is I'm heating up the metal to a temperature at which the solder is going to adhere to both the pad and the header pin itself. So it's it's not going to hurt anything if you hold it here and just let it heat up. And I take my solder, and once this pad heats up, this solder should just flow into the solder pad and make a really nice solder joint here. So if we kind of see that, if it's if this joint here is not shiny, or if it's like corroded or kind of bubbles up, then you know that your soldering tip and the pad have not heated up to the correct temperature. So you go ahead and just leave that soldering tip and the iron on the pad for a longer period of time before you apply the solder. And this is how you get really good solder joints. So same process, do that for all the pins. And then what I do for the PSOC kit is I've already soldered it, but I just wanted to show you what I do, is I'll take a row like so. I'll break it off for however many pins are here. I think there's about, I don't know, 20 pins or so. So I have two 20 pin rows, and I just seat them into the board like this, get 2 of them, let the board rest on there, and then I individually solder each joint, um, making sure that the tip is on both the pad on the PCB and the pin, touching both and heating both metal pieces of metal uh, to a hot temperature, hot enough to melt the solder, and the solder should just flow into the joint, um, and this is the end result. So we'll do this in the lab. I just kind of wanted to prep you guys and just get you set up to get the best results and the best type of solder joints.